the background.
Great.
Thank you, Brent.
So why don't we go ahead and get started, Mr. Ed Washington, you want to kick us off?
Yes, I'd like to welcome everybody back from a 5-week hiatus. Good to see you all. Look forward to working with you today. We have some very important things that we'll be doing. And so if you have your green cards in yellow and red, I'm going to turn it over to the next person and say, have a great day.
Great. So I'll go ahead and review our instructions here. Next slide, please. Just a reminder for the closed caption feature, we have closed captions available in both English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within the Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. The website for that is https://ibr.news/captions. Next slide. How to access the closed caption in the Zoom feature. If you go to the bottom of the Zoom, you should see a closed caption icon, CC icon. And if you click that, that will allow for closed captioning. Next slide. Just a reminder of our webinar tips for participants. Again, thank you for joining us today. Please join audio by either phone or computer, not both. That will reduce the echoing. We encourage panelists to turn on your video. Again, if you can turn on your video, that allows for a much more inclusive and fuller sort of experience given our virtual sort of setting. Please keep your audio on mute when not speaking. And if you experience any technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 503-897-9219. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of public input instructions. There will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today. That will occur at about 5:45 p.m. To dial in by phone, use the following instructions. Dial 1-669-900-6833, and you want to include the meeting ID, which is 993-5459-6043, and the passcode is 674942. You'll want to dial *9 to raise your hand. After you are invited to speak, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Next slide, please. And of course, to submit comment after the meeting, fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CAG Public Comment and the subject line. You may also call 360-859-0494 Washington, or 503-897-9218 Oregon, or you may call our 800 number at 1-888-503-6735. Please state the CAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CAG Public Comment and the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to CAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. Next slide. Just to go over our agenda today, we just conducted a quick welcome. We'll have a program update. We'll then have an opportunity of reviewing the CAG charter. Thank you all for comments that you've submitted. We'll be seeking a consensus. So as Chair Washington indicated, if you do have your consensus cards, we'll be asking for you to use them today. We'll also have a conversation around our community vision, and then we'll talk a little bit about sort of the CAG vision and have some breakout sessions there, and then we'll have a wrap up. So with that, Lynn, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Johnell. And this next section is going to be packed full of information. So as several of us have noted, it's been 5 weeks since we all got together. And let me assure you that the program team has been extremely busy during that time. And at this point, Greg Johnson is going to bring us up to date. Greg?
Thank you so much, Lynn. Well, first off, I want to assure you that these 5 weeks have seemed like 5 months because things are moving quickly and changing every day. So what the things that I want to update you on is last we talked, we were receiving verbal guidance from our federal partners on purpose and need and vision and values and how that fits into our current program that we're looking for. So we are taking all of the information that was generated from folks who had an interest in seeing climate and equity infused in these areas. And we are creating what we are calling a framework for equity and a framework for climate that will talk specifically about the things that we are going to do related to these 2 vital areas of the program. So that's one of the things we're working on as we are waiting for written guidance from our federal partners. So we have submitted language to our federal partners that had both equity and climate, and verbally we are to the point where we don't think that's going to be accepted, but we also are looking at where in the NEPA document, the National Environmental Policy Act document, that we can insert these 2 important frameworks. So once again, that is the key that we're working on now, but other things that we know have to be done is we are gathering the changes. We have listened to both CAG, EAG, and the ESG to say what has changed over these last 7 or 8 years since the program went dormant. And we are putting together a matrix that will have these changes and what impacts they may have going forward. So we are, that's one of the key things we're working on. So we have been talking to our federal partners. They recognize that things have changed and that we are going to have to make sure that we recognize and acknowledge those changes and make sure that we are listening to the community and embedding equity and climate throughout the program and not putting ourselves in possible jeopardy of starting the program anew. So let's go to the next slide. So what our federal partners have told us is that we have 4 basic pathways to go forward to complete the environmental process for this program. Step 1 is common to all of the pathways, and that's a reevaluation. So that means that the feds are going to look at our previous NEPA decision, our record of decision, analysis, documentation, to see if it's still valid, to see what has changed, and if these changes are significant or impactful enough to lead to more in-depth analysis and public meetings. So that reevaluation will be the process that no matter what we do, that happens. So if after that evaluation is done, the feds may say, yep, this is all that's required is a reevaluation. So that becomes the first of 4 pathways. A reevaluation looking at, okay, things have not changed tremendously, and this program can go forward and we will amend the existing record of decision and move forward. The second pathway is a limited scope supplemental environmental impact statement. So what this means is there are changes significant enough that they have to be analyzed and looked into more depth, and there has to be public meetings to discuss these impactful changes. So those changes that are probably spotty here and there, but do not impact one another, that would require us to do a limited scope supplemental environmental document. So the third pathway is if there are so many changes and the changes impact one another and they begin to interact with other changes that you have to look at the entire program, that becomes a full supplemental environmental impact statement. So the option 4 is if there are so many changes and they are so different than what was derived 7 or 8 years ago that got us to the record of decision, that we would have to restart the entire NEPA process. So we are, right now, we think with the changes that we have gathered, we think that we are probably heading towards option 2 or 3, but those, we do not determine which pathway we're on. That is determined by our federal partners. They will look and evaluate the changes, evaluate the documentation we send, and they will say, yes, you are on this pathway. So right now, we are gathering all of the change information, making sure we're talking to our federal partners and evaluating the risk of each scenario. So next slide, please. So all of this we tried to put in a graphic that we are presenting to groups like yourselves that describe the different pathways. The one difference between each of these pathways to the far left of this graphic is the reevaluation only. That is the shortest time frame. That keeps us on path. As a matter of fact, it probably shortens our time for what we need to do with this program if everything is looked at as only a reevaluation. When we get into pathway 2 or 3, that includes more public hearings, more input to have those processes roll forward. And we think that probably path 3 would probably be 6 to 8 months longer than our existing schedule shows, but we would still be looking at beginning construction in 2025. And finally, path 4, where they tell us, you know, this is an entirely new project, start over. This is the path where everything that was on the table before, whether it's a no build option, whether it's looking at third bridge, looking at commuter rail, looking at high speed rail, all of those options come back on the table, have to be looked at. New purpose and need has to be established. That's the process that would take an additional 2 to 3 years to complete beyond our existing schedule. So once again, we're not afraid of any of the 3 paths. We can get any of them done. But once again, we want to be mindful of the charge that we receive from both governors and from our bi-state team that says, be efficient in the information that you have already gathered, and make sure that you are choosing a path that does not have to go back and repeat work. We believe that if we are on path 4, all of those options that have been tossed out before will get tossed out again because they don't meet the purpose and need of this program. But once again, it's about the time that it will take to do it. So those are the four pathways that we're looking at, and our federal partners are going to give us more written guidance as we move forward. We're once again looking for their guidance within the next week or so, back in writing on some of the things that we have submitted to them. So with that, I think we were going to have some time for some questions.
And I see that Michael has his hand up. So Michael, we'll do Michael, then we'll do Bill, and then Sam.
Thank you. I sure appreciate it. Greg, thank you for the summary. I think this dovetails with the comments I would love to make, and it helps provide some structure to the way I've been trying to think of it. But it seems to me, it has been lately, that there potentially will be some limitations to what the community advisory group and others like us can actually shape. And it sounds like that guidance is coming, it's ongoing, coming from our federal partners. And I think what's been ambiguous to me, and I think would be helpful for me and others in the group, is as that guidance, sort of firms up, a very clear communication from the program as to what we can change and affect and contribute to, and where we can't. And I think that part is not clear to me, and I've tried to sort of determine that through our discussions. So that's really important. And then the second quick thing that I'd like to request is that before we move, I know we are not in the solutions phase of our planning, but before we move to that, having some actual clear data. And I think that record of decision was 2011. So I believe that was 10 years ago.
Yes.
And a lot has changed in that time. And I'm interested in data on how things have changed, like actual numbers, before we're asked to reach consensus and make decisions on recommended solutions. So those are the two things: the communication on where we can actually be of service and what we can change, and sort of what is predetermined. I really would appreciate that. Thank you.
So it's a great question, Michael. And I think where the community advisory group, equity advisory group are going to weigh in is what things have changed, what changes that you guys would like to see, if it's a design option, if it's something that we're going to talk about, whether there needs to be a interchange on I-5 directly to Hayden Island, or should that interchange be off of Marine Drive? So the community advisory group and other groups are going to weigh in and put their opinions forward and give us advice on what you think of that type of issue. We're going to talk about transit. We're going to run the numbers. We're going to demonstrate what the numbers say, but the community advisory group will be able to weigh in and say, yeah, this is a smart thing to do, hearing all of the controversy around the transit mode issue. We're going to ask you guys to weigh in. So you guys will have a significant part in helping shape what some of these change alternatives, what these design options will look like. Things going as far as what type of bridge we're going to build. We're going to ask you guys, we're going to have a list of pros and cons and say, what do you think? So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of topics, of meaty topics for you guys to weigh in on. And we will definitely start having those conversations as we are moving forward. And remind me of your second question.
It was around data, actual data. It sounds like you plan to present. I know that the program team and others are looking at data. Would love to. It sounds like you will be helping us with that. But as an example, your example on the interchange, it's like, well, what are the traffic numbers? You know what I mean? How has that changed? Actual data would really help us tell you what we think, I believe.
Yeah, we're going to have experts. We're gathering data as we speak on traffic volumes. we're going to have to do projections and run models. And we're going to show all of those things to you of what this means. We know that there is controversy on the number of lanes that go across the bridge. We know there are 3 through lanes to the north, 3 through lanes to the south. So we know at minimum, there's going to be 3 through lanes. But the number of auxiliary lanes are going to be driven by modeling and the data that shows, okay, here's where people are getting off, where they're getting on. Do we need a 1 lane auxiliary lane, 2 lanes, or 3 lanes worth of auxiliary? Those are the type of information that we're going to gather and we're going to present. We're going to have our technical experts step in and present that type of information to you folks so you understand and can weigh in and tell us what you think about it. So data gathering and data analysis is going to be one of the key things that we do.
Sure, appreciate it. Thank you.
We have Bill and then Sam.
Yeah, my question kind of following up on Michael. I think one of the things that you pointed out, I'd call it compare and contrast what we're doing so far and what has been done in the past. How do you compare and contrast what's been done, what's needed? But I want to know, you keep referring to I'll say our federal partners. It sounds like there's more than one that they're working with, which is normal, but all I've heard about, and maybe I didn't pay attention at some point in time, that NEPA was the one that we were looking for environmental activity. But then about 2 weeks ago, Representative Blumenauer came out and said there would be no bridge if there's not transit across that bridge. And it was pure and simple. That was his statement. So I wonder how that fits into what we as a community advisory group can be able to recommend options, opportunities, and I'm not saying yes or no at that, but that's going to have to be something that's up front. If that is true, we're going to have to know that has to be part of our plan for sure. And if it's light rail, if it's high speed rail that you mentioned, or some other kind of transit, I think he actually said light rail, but that I could be wrong on that. Anyway, just to follow up, if you could clarify a couple of those things, who's our federal partners here?
Okay, we'll do, Bill. So our federal partners who provide oversight on this program, we have 2, the Federal Transit Administration and the Federal Highway Administration. So when I do mention our federal partners, those are the 2 that we're speaking of. We have other federal permitting agencies such as the Coast Guard, such as the Corps of Engineers. They do not provide oversight. They are permitting agencies, and we do have to talk to them and satisfy their concerns to get permits. But the oversight is being provided by Federal Transit Administration and Federal Highway Administration. So now the comment by Congressman Blumenauer, and everybody is welcome to their opinion and to what they think is the right answer. But our team is held to a higher standard. We have to go through the NEPA process. We have to be data informed and data driven. And far be it from me to pick a fight with Congressman Blumenauer. I have a tremendous amount of respect for what he does and his long history in the House of Representatives. So we have to stick to the facts. We cannot predetermine what is going to be. So we're going to be running data. We're going to be analyzing that data, and we're going to make decisions on what the data says. If we go anywhere else than that, we'll be whipsawed all over the place. And they'll say, well, you did it here, we'll do it for this over here. So we have to be data and process driven, or we will fail.
Sam and then Tom.
Yeah, Greg, you were in the paper quoting after the Washington State Legislature didn't set aside $1 billion for the I-5 bridge. And you were quoted as saying the fact that the transportation package with construction funding for the interstate bridge replacement program did not pass this session does not represent a setback for the program. I appreciate your optimism and I appreciate your confidence. The fact that Washington State Legislature didn't pass something was a problem, but they did vote to fund the continuing of this program. That's great. But the Oregon legislature even failed to even debate it, even bring it up. And I appreciate your level of confidence. And I think you even said we have years to plan this. You know, clock's ticking, and I don't want to give the state legislators or the politicians, elected officials, an impression that we got forever to do this. So how can we kind of set a sense of urgency? You know, I guess I appreciate your optimism and confidence, but I would have said, hey, we're really disappointed. We're hoping that we can get this thing going and kickstarted. We'll try again, of course, but the sooner we get the funding commitment from both states, the better it is. Is there any way we can send that message, kind of help you out?
So Sam, that's a great message to send, but what I don't want to do is put some false deadlines for the legislature. It would have been great if they would have approved it and said, here it is. They would have been actually 2 to 3 years earlier than we are necessarily going to need it. So we have some time to get it done. And the fact that they're talking about it at this stage, it does fuel my optimism that something is going to happen in both legislatures. They are committed. We talked to the bi-state. As a matter of fact, I've been having one-on-one conversations with our bi-state legislative members. And there is a strong commitment. They understand the nature of the problem here. So, but for me to create a false deadline for them, it would be disingenuous. And we do have time. It would have been great if they would have did it, but it is, at this point, it's not a huge problem or a concern because we have a lot of time to talk about it.
All right, thank you.
We have Tom and then Martha.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you know, it sounds like what you're saying is that the closer we get to path 4, the more pushback there will be from federal leadership and up and down the chain. I'd like to know a little more about what of the options that were previously considered in 2011 have been rejected and are effectively off the table so that we don't waste a lot of time worrying about those. Or where are the decision branches that are still open to us moving forward? Because there's a lot of places where we could veer the project in different directions, but there's also not a lot of places where we'll get pushback because we're getting too close to option 4. So I'd like to have a sense of how to identify those.
So, excellent question. So some of the things that were taken off the table that did not meet purpose and need last time, and this is going to be an incomplete list. So with that understanding, I'll give you a couple of examples. So the no-build alternative did not satisfy any of the needs that have been identified, any of the purpose and need issues that were identified. So not building anything and relying on magic to happen to solve the problems was looked at as a non-starter. The construction of a third bridge corridor was also looked at a non-starter because it does not speak to the resiliency, the earthquake resiliency that's necessary on this bridge. It doesn't speak to the existing congestion in this corridor, and the land use policies in Oregon would vote against a third bridge at this point. So those are things that were looked at and studied intensely and said they don't meet the purpose and need of what's happening here. So those are things that if folks wanted to put those back on the table, those would come back in a pathway 4 scenario. So we think once again they would fail, but the issue is the time that it would take to structure the arguments, to make the public presentations, and to demonstrate why they would fail.
Where would you put the conversation regarding a tunnel in that?
So there are two types of tunnel. There's a bored tunnel where you have the tunnel boring machine going underground, and the tunnel that's been proposed for this is a immersed tube tunnel where you actually are cutting a swath of the Columbia River and the banks of the Columbia, and you're actually placing these tunnel segments in this trench, recovering it, and this becomes now your roadway. So we've had our team look in depth at this. We were waiting until our purpose and need is determined to have our final analysis of this. But right now, what we are hearing from our tribal partners, one of their large concerns is the archaeological resources that exist on the banks of the Columbia River. And as you may know that, there were human bones found just in a small section when the CRC was being done. And now you're talking about moving millions of cubic yards of earth that could possibly decimate some of these sensitive archaeological areas. So we're going to look at it. What we're seeing so far does not bode well for that as a potential outcome. And the second issue is, how do you get up to grade to connect SR14? How do you get up to grade to now on Hayden Island to reconnect to the surface? So those are some of the technical issues that exist for that type of construction. But once again, we have not ruled it out, but we are going to look at purpose and need and how it fits into a purpose and need scenario.
Martha?
Yeah, I was wondering on the reevaluation, what it is that you're actually reevaluating. Some things are easy to know. Traffic obviously has changed a lot, but I wondered if you could sort of just give a general list of what other issues you would be reevaluating.
So the fact that Vancouver now has a mature bus rapid transit system did not exist during the first go round. So that would have to be looked at and how that fits into the conversation. The fact that the Port of Portland is now saying that we have no plans going into the future to use Western Hayden Island as a development area. That now has to be taken into account and what impacts that has on how Hayden Island is accessed. Those are just a few of the items. As we talk about equity and climate, those things now have to be circulated into the mix of what that means overall for the program and how those things fit into the program. So this is just an example, and it's the list is fairly complex, but it's something that we can look into, and the feds will make the determination whether it's impactful enough to keep us in path 1 or path 2 or path 3, or if it's more impactful, land us into an entirely new project.
Is there a place for us to look at the reevaluation information, or is that coming in the future?
The feds is not in the process yet. We're gathering all of the information, data, and analysis that we're going to provide to our federal partners that they will look at and say, okay, we've completed our reevaluation. This is the path you're on. So that process, we're in a data gathering, data analysis process right now. So they have not started a reevaluation. And I'll ask Chris or Angela if if they're on to speak to that issue.
Thanks, Greg. This is Angela. Martha, the reevaluation won't be initiated until we determine what changes there are to the design. And it will be those changes to design that we will reevaluate, see if there are differences in impacts compared to what was previously studied. And we will look at the full gamut of environmental resources to tease out whether there are changes in impacts, you know, from air quality and noise to wetlands and fish and wildlife and so forth. That's the intent of the reevaluation, and the outcome of it is a statement on whether those changes, as shown here in kind of this middle row of darker blue boxes, is from the reevaluation. It's, do the design options have significant adverse impacts that weren't previously disclosed in the draft and final EIS for the prior work? If the answer is no, there are no new significant adverse impacts, then the reevaluation is the stopping point for the NEPA work. However, if there are significant impacts identified that weren't disclosed and made available for public comment, that's when we look at some level of supplemental EIS to document that analysis, provide the public the opportunity to comment on it, and prepare the final EIS with an amended record of decision. Hopefully that didn't get too in the weeds.
You can't get too in the weeds with me on this. Just let you know that.
Yeah.
So you're not really, are you doing like a full reevaluation of existing conditions on some of these things? Because I mean, what Greg was talking about with the Clark County Transit's changes since last time, and the traffic changes, and the Port of Portland's changes. So those changes to plans and policies and existing conditions, you're looking at those right before you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a
Yeah.
way for us to look at that too, or is that something we need to wait for?
Yeah, we don't have that ready for you. It's really, how did those existing conditions, you remember over the last month or two, we have gone through some exercises with the CAG to say what has changed. And you guys helped us flesh some of that out. And so now that we have identified some of the changes, how does that affect what the solution for the interstate bridge replacement looks like? You know, there's new development. Some buildings have gone away, some new buildings have come up. There's waterfront development, there's different development on Hayden Island. And so how do we need to adjust and make design changes? And so that will all be considered in the impact analysis, including those changed existing conditions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just want to stop for a second and see if there are any additional questions by members of the CAG. Okay, seeing or hearing none, we will move next to the EAG update by Jake.
Hi, everybody. Jake Moore from the equity team on the IBR program. So we had an EAG meeting, and maybe some of you tuned in last Monday, and a few interesting things came out of that that we wanted to make you aware of. One is a big task of that group was to define equity for the program, and we put a lot of thought, a lot of work into that, and came up with a definition that we have recommended to the program administrator for it to be a really foundational piece of how we are centering equity for the program. We define it in terms of both process and outcomes, and I'm actually going to show you that in a sec. We also started to look at and discuss potential screening criteria and performance measures, so that as we are going through this this process and looking at design options, how are we ensuring that that we are really capturing and being consistent with our equity commitment in a measurable way in terms of both process and outcomes again. Next meeting is May 17th, Monday, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Those are always open to the public, and you can access them on the website just like you can with these meetings. So just to go over the definition that we developed, and I'll note real quick, the process we went through, we talked about it as a full committee. We actually had a subgroup that dug into the kind of wordsmithing side of things and came up with this definition. The Interstate Bridge Replacement Program defines equity in terms of both process and outcomes. Process equity means that the program prioritizes access, influence, and decision-making power for marginalized and underserved communities throughout the program in establishing objectives, design, implementation, and evaluation of success. Outcome equity is the result of successful process equity, and it's demonstrated by tangible transportation and economic benefits for marginalized and underserved communities. You might ask, what are those marginalized and underserved communities? So we have listed who those include. They are defined as those who experience and or have experienced discrimination and exclusion based on identity, such as BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, communities with limited English proficiency, or you'll see that as LEP often, persons with lower income, houseless individuals and families, immigrants and refugees, young people, and older adults. So together, process equity and outcome equity contribute to addressing the impacts of and removing longstanding injustices experienced by these communities. So this will serve as a foundation of an equity framework that we are putting together that will go into a lot more detail about how we are incorporating equity throughout all activities of the program. So that's just a quick piece for me. And I'm going to, I believe, turn it back over to Jason.
Thanks, Jake. Hello, everybody. As you all know, we have continued to meet with you guys on individual meetings and one on sometimes three of us meeting with you, and they've just been fantastic. So we've met with 26 and have about 5 meetings left. So be on the lookout. If we haven't met with you, be on the lookout to get some emails so we can schedule a meeting with you. Just a quick summary of the themes of what we continue to hear is a strong desire from this group to move to the next phase of the program, which you'll hear about later on tonight, and we're getting to that point. We were glad to hear that you guys have an appreciation of the historical context and information that was given to you from the beginning of this program, and we're going to be mindful to keep continuing to be communicative about that and provide some information. We're going to continue with our breakout groups. They seem to be very productive. We're going to keep these in the meetings. It provides a lot of good contact between our members, so you guys get kind of the smaller group pieces, and hopefully we're getting a good mix of our groups, and you're not seeing the same people in each of all your breakout groups. A communication piece between meetings has been raised, and we're going to be looking into that to see, now that we're meeting at about every 4 to 5 weeks, there will be 5 weeks between our next meeting from today. So we'll talk about potentially a communication piece to keep you guys updated. And overall, people seem to be appreciative of the individual meetings. So thank you very much. And just one quick note, we still do have an open seat for an at-large spot in Oregon, and the internal program staff is looking at that right now, deciding on the final process, and we plan to have that seat filled by our next meeting in June. So that's kind of our quick summary of the CAG meetings. And Lynn, I believe you're going to help us walk through the charter.
I am indeed. And I just want to note that these next steps are us paying attention to what we've all said individually and collectively. So you've seen the draft charter. If you recall, we went into breakout groups and provided input. Program staff captured that input and has come back and provided us with changes based on that feedback. Next slide, please. So the elements, just to remind us, the elements of the charter, and this is the charter for our very own group, is purpose, structure, roles and responsibilities, meetings, membership, our shared commitment, and adoption by consensus. Some of these sections had changes, some did not. And so I'm going to hand it over to Johnell, who's going to walk us through the changes.
Great, thank you, Lynn. As Lynn indicated, here are some of the changes that we wanted to reflect. These are changes that you all had recommended. And so under the advisory group clarification, the change is for the perspectives and insights shared by members of the CAG are intended to influence the IBR program. Under the consensus defined, the change was to achieve consensus. All members will actively participate while working through differences. Consensus means that CAG members can live with the recommendation. Such recommendation is consistent with a CAG member's interests, duties, and obligations, and can be supported by that member. And then under the our shared commitment, there was an add of systemic racism versus racism. And there was a note that I will notice the power dynamics in the room for it to be, I will be aware of how I use my privilege. I will be curious of taking up too much emotional airtime space and so on. And so we really emphasize that I will notice the power dynamics in the room. That was another change that was made. So those were the changes based on the feedback we received. I'm going to stop here and see if Lisa had any additional thoughts relative to this piece.
No, we just had a really good conversation in each of those breakout sessions, and that we're hoping that we reflected all of the feedback and are certainly open to any additional changes, but felt like having the clean copy of the charter and then the red line version would really help you to be able to see what changes were reflective of the dialogue in our last meeting.
So our goal is to do a check to see if you are ready to offer up a consensus on the amended charter. And I'm going to go through the process for our consensus model. Again, a reminder that participants develop and decide on proposals with the aim of acceptance by all, including the input of all committee members, results in better proposals that helps to address all potential concerns. It also fosters a collegial group, resulting in cohesion and interpersonal connection. And it requires active participation and working through differences. And, we use consensus a lot, but the Latin word comes from agreement, accord. That's essentially what consensus means. We all have our consensus cards. You'll recall that green indicates I agree and support the CAG charter. Yellow is I have a question, but can live with the recommendation. And red is I oppose the CAG charter, but I commit to work with the group to find a solution that works for all. So that's our process. As a reminder, I'll stop there and receive any questions. Okay, Lynn, I'm going to, Adina, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand feature. Yeah, I remember there was a section, or I think it was Sam Kim who eloquently put it as how do we vote someone off the island? Was that section also updated, and can you remind me what it was settled on?
Lisa, do you recall?
I do remember that feedback. And when we went back and we looked at the charter, we felt like we had covered what we needed to in the charter. So we didn't make any changes. So if this group feels like it's not strong enough, now would be the time to discuss that. Ultimately, if there was a problem, I think that our program administrator felt comfortable working with our co-chairs to resolve that in whatever way was consistent with our values and with the charter, but that we had articulated that enough in the charter. Again, we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with that. So you didn't see any red lines to that section since we felt like it was already there.
Other questions, comments? Seeing none, Lynn, I'm going to hand it over to you to call the question for consensus.
Before I do, I just want to say, first of all, in this COVID environment, consensus and collaboration can be even more difficult. And so I just want to give a shout out to the program team and support for coming up with some of these ways for all of us to hopefully get to consensus. So thank you for that. At this point, I will call the question. This is, do you agree and support the CAG charter? If you do, please show a green card. If you have a question or opposed, then show either the yellow or the red card. But this is the first, I think, formal approval document that we have exercised. So at this point, if I can ask everyone to take their screen, all of the voting members.
Can you take off the shared screen so we can see the whole everybody?
Oh, yeah, I moved it over to the left. Thank you. Good. So all of the voting members, please make sure that you're showing live and then show the color that reflects your vote. And we do need to see if you're abstaining.
Jana has her hand up.
Well, I had my hand up because I don't have my cards with me today. So now what do I do? That's my
can we do thumbs up, level, or thumbs down? Would that be an informal approach?
That's great.
I
Okay,
apologize.
great.
Thank you.
No, that's fine. Jana, if I can see whichever way you would like to, whatever gesture you would, thank you. Ed, how about you? We can't see what you're showing us. Thank you. Mark Riker, thumbs up. Ashton? Perfect. Okay, I think, oh, we have a second screen. Hang on, let me just make sure I'm getting everybody. Thank you, Jasmine. Kevin, thank you. We are a creative group, are we not? Okay, I think I can declare that we've had our first win. Everybody give themselves a round of applause. That's so exciting. Thank you. With that, I think we're going to go, and really, thank you very much. Keep your cards handy though, because we will have an opportunity to use them again. And with that, if we could go back up to screen share, we're going to talk about community values. Next slide, please. So these are highlights from recent community engagement activities, and this is just a summary. I don't believe anything here will surprise any of us, but we want to make sure that we have a shared understanding. So there was widespread agreement that the 6 previously identified, and that was previously identified in the former documents that Greg walked us through at the beginning of this meeting. So the first 3 on the left, congestion, earthquake, safety concerns, were the top 3. And then the next 3 were also identified transportation problems that haven't gone away. And that's biped, impaired freight, and limited public transportation. Next slide, please. This is additional information with regard to community values. So the problems were in the previous slide. These are kind of transitioning into community values. And so the values that our community told us are important to us are the safe multimodal bridge, working together as a region, accessible and easy transit options, iconic and affordable bridge, regional history, and a modern bridge for the next 100 years. And I think I'm being accurate in saying that these slides represent not just the surveys that each of us as CAG took, but also the community at large. And one thing that continues to strike me and be compelling about the group that we're all in, the CAG, is that we're tracking what the community wants. So the broad cross-section of representation is very effective. Next slide, please. So the community input will shape the program work. So let's talk a little bit about that. Engagement efforts demonstrate that the community, and CAG, I might say, is eager to begin digging into the details. That's kind of the fun part, right? And that's what we heard in individual sessions, that's what we've heard in surveys, and that's what we've heard from our community. The community feedback on purpose and need and vision and value is being used to ensure design proposed reflect the community's values and priorities. So we're testing the design against the purpose and need, vision, and values. Within that process, we will be including climate and equity frameworks and corresponding performance measures for those of us that are data geeks. That's helpful to help embed these commitments throughout the program work. Screening criteria will be developed based on the climate and equity frameworks, along with the community values and priorities, which will be used to help shape design options and guide decision-making. Next slide, please. So the following community values and priorities will be used as a starting point. So once we move from community purpose and need and vision and values, our next step in the process is to develop screening criteria. So these are values and priorities and will be used as a starting point. So past transportation projects have caused harm to communities of concern. And the program should center equity and avoid further harm. And as we heard from the EAG, equity is both an outcome and a process. There's a strong correlation between transportation and climate change, and the program needs to advance opportunities to reduce impacts from transportation facilities and improve resiliency to global climate change. Finally, transit and active transportation facilities must reflect the needs of all ages and abilities and remove barriers, including language, to access and ensure availability of transportation choices. Next slide. Furthermore, cost effectiveness should be assessed. We need to look to create opportunities for job creation, growth that impact economic empowerment. Recognize that congestion impacts personal vehicles, freight, and reduces public transit reliability and safety. We need to pay attention to natural resources. We need to foster leadership and cooperation between bi-state partners and provide ongoing opportunities for meaningful, equitable, and transparent community engagement. Again, these are our shared community values. Next slide, please. And now Lisa's gonna take us into our next phase.
So we have spent quite a bit of time together as a group talking about these concepts of purpose and need and vision and values. And we have done extensive outreach. And as Lynn mentioned, the outreach that's been done with the broader community is very reflective of what we've heard from the community advisory group. We want to just spend a few minutes in a breakout session. You had a document, you've had several documents to review, but the one that we put in front of you last week in anticipation of this meeting was a couple-page document that is meant to really summarize in a high level what the community values are as it relates to this program moving forward. And it is that foundational piece that we've really wanted to focus on that helps us build from here. So we have 2 questions that we'd like to discuss in the breakout sessions, with the anticipation that this is your time to ask questions regarding those couple pages that we sent out to you, so that you could come back as we gather together and we can reach consensus on that document. Our goal is to be able to send a very clear message to the executive steering group in terms of what these community values mean to the community, and that we are ready to move those statements forward to them, so that in their work, they understand that you have had an opportunity to weigh in, to provide feedback, and to share your thoughts. So we'll spend about 10 minutes. We want to make sure that we're allowing enough time for questions. We had a few more questions as Greg gave his program update. We anticipate we might have a few questions a little later in our time together. So let's do 10 minutes today. I got a nod from Jason, so I think we're good with that time. We will automatically, as we do every time we have breakout sessions, move into those sessions to answer the 2 questions. Is the community value summary reflective of the broader community's values? And which elements of a replacement solution are most important to you? So with that, we have a facilitator for each group, and we have a Jamboarder, which I don't think is a real word, but it's one we're going to start to use in our environment today. So with that, we'll head off into our breakout sessions. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Jeffrey. They're in breakout rooms right now, so I'm going to send you to one of those rooms real quick. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Yep. Afternoon.
Okay, let's see if we've got everybody back. Looks like it, Brent. Okay, I should not have volunteered that we move from 15 minutes to 10 minutes because we were in quite a good dialogue and did not have enough time. So we have several groups, and I'd like to be able to allow for the groups to debrief. Because we just jumped right in and I was in group one, we did not elect someone to do the debrief. So I will do a very quick overview of what was discussed and then move to group two. But certainly if anyone from my group would like to add any additional thoughts, please do. I think where we had the most robust conversation was around three key elements, which is the burden of the cost of the bridge, whether that be in the construction or in the operation, and the benefits, and equally measuring that cost benefit analysis. And there certainly was a little undertone of Oregon and Washington. And so, you start to see that emerge as we get into any of these particular issues around how we're going to fund this. I do think that it is an area that we tried to identify in the summary document around cost effectiveness, and I think also in the fostering leadership and cooperation, but that was certainly a comment by this group that perhaps there could have been stronger language around sharing the burden in the solutions. So any other feedback? The other comment was just also around, I think, the role of technology options and looking forward to the next 100 years. So anyone else feel like they need to add any other comments? Tom?
Well, we did talk about the climate issue and bringing that a little more to the forefront in balance with the conversation about equity. If those are our two major metrics for whether we've succeeded in the project, we need a stronger voice for the climate in the conversation somehow. And Lisa, you said that there's somebody new on the staff that will be providing that. So that was good news for me.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
We also had the fuel sources. We need to look forward and include in the discussion the fuel sources that we might not know yet, but they will be in 20, 30 years, the major fuel sources for the transportation system.
Thank you. Appreciate the ability for the group to kind of weigh in and add a little bit more perspective. I'm going to go ahead and move us to the second group. Jake and Katie, who do you have that will debrief?
We did the same thing and didn't assign someone. For the sake of time, I'll summarize. So the first thing that we talked about was how it is difficult to capture all the community's values. It's hard to be inclusive of everything. And so we need to acknowledge that we're going to miss something almost no matter what. We also talked a lot about active transportation and a desire to strengthen that language around active transportation, not just talking about all modes, definitely not talking about active transportation as an afterthought, but really as a crucial central piece of the equation to reduce congestion, to improve environmental conditions, et cetera. And the other thing we talked about on the next Jamboard about the elements of a replacement solution, we mostly talked about kind of the process of how all this work gets done and the economic and workforce opportunities that there are, and how we can make sure that those opportunities go to communities of color who often don't quite have the access that others do. How can we ensure that suppliers and others who are smaller firms can benefit from all of the economic opportunities that this will create. Anything I missed, group?
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Okay, let's move to group 3. Looks like we had Salome and Lauren, who will be debriefing the group. Okay, Salome.
Yeah, sorry about that, y'all. I had to fix my lighting so I wasn't not visible. So our group also did not pick someone to share out, so I will share out. We collectively agreed that the summary is reflective of the broader community values. Some folks wanted to see things made bold or underlined to just add emphasis, such as the data-informed decision-making. Also talking about addressing congestion and capacity issues when talking about this. We also discussed multimodal and transportation choice being something that's a hot button issue for this region, considering that we've had 2 congressional members speak up about the program and what they would like to see in very strong voices. And so making sure that we do our due diligence to make data-informed decisions, as well as at the same time, keeping our commitment to centering equity when we're looking at that data and how we choose to move forward. And then I think if we can go to the next slide, I can talk about some of the values we had. Yeah, so the values that we had were getting something that was effective at moving people as well as freight. And also, again, applying that equity-based lens to this issue to make sure that we are not only bringing our voices to the table, but voices of people in our communities, and also uplifting voices from people outside of our communities that use the bridge in a different way or have different relationships with the bridge.
Great.
And that's our group.
Thank you. Okay, Katie and Sam.
I also didn't talk to my team about who wanted to share out. Is there anyone who wanted to do that? I have some talkative ones in my group. Sam, Kim.
Sure, I'll go. Okay, all right. You can't ever give me a platform because I'll probably keep talking. And the danger of me talking is that I'll probably represent my view unfairly over everybody else's view. So I'll try to keep this more balanced. I think there was concern about multimodal, the pedestrians and the bikers and the cars all being safe, because today it's very unsafe. And bicyclists can run over pedestrians who can then be pushed to into the river or into the traffic. So that was a big concern. But I think all of us have also expressed the fact that, hey, you know what? Let's get this built. Let's get this moving so that we'll have something instead of nothing. And I think we all agree that all these community values are great. And I don't think we can compromise on any one of them. However, I think all of us, me particularly, even though I may feel strongly about one thing, if we can get a bridge built, I'm willing to compromise. So I think that's kind of what came out of this is, yes, these are great community values, but let's work together.
Yeah, will you go to the next frame for him? Yeah, thank you. He covered kind of the pedestrian and bike. There were a few more points made that you see there about, really ensuring that we give opportunities to different construction industries and how we kind of contract this project out during construction, emphasis on congestion relief and making sure freight has improved access. I think Sam covered everything else.
Great job, Katie.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's our last group, but did I miss a group, Brent or Jason? Okay, why don't we go ahead and take down the slides. You're familiar with the consensus cards. So I think I'm gonna see if our Chair Washington would like to call the question here. You're on mute, sir. Okay, gotta unmute. We're still not hearing you, but I can see you talking. There you go. Okay.
I can't see anybody else though.
Okay, well, we're
so,
gonna take down the slide. Can we take down the slide? Okay, now we can see folks. And we already have a yellow card.
Yes. Well, I'd like to call the question for seeking consensus on community on a chart. Oh no, on community values, and I'm fumbling here. Jeez. Community values and community values and priorities. Sorry, I had some.
There you go. You got it.
So that's you know the exercise, or if you don't, now if you're in favor, 100%, put up the green card. And I guess really you can put up the yellow or the red, but I don't know if anybody will vote for them. But all in favor of accepting this, would you please put up the green card? If you are a little bit hesitant about it, put up the yellow card. And if you are still hesitant about it, but maybe willing to be brought around, you would put up your red card. So
okay,
how many red cards? You got everything?
Yeah, so we definitely. We probably need to, thank you. I have Michael, Jeffrey, Ashton, Tom, and Tom that have yellow cards, and Diana that has a red. So why don't we start from red and then move to yellow? So Diana, do you want to share a little bit about what you're thinking?
Yeah, so I was just noting that we just asked for individuals' feedbacks, and there were people that I heard were wanting to strengthen language and underline language. So I just didn't know what we were going to do with all that feedback or why it was asked. And then we want a consensus vote. So I was just trying to clarify the process there.
Appreciate that. I think that's a good clarification. I think what we're looking for in seeking consensus was, is this reflective of our community values? And I think the conversation around in the breakout sessions was relative to kind of how we move these forward and how we use this as that foundational piece. If you're not comfortable with this, then this is the time to talk about it. And if we don't feel like we're ready to move forward with a recommendation, then we can go back and we can work on that language. We were hoping to be able to see whether or not this was reflective of the conversations that we've had and that community engagement that's already been done, and that it was a document that we felt like we could move forward. So does that answer your process question?
Yeah, I think that it still doesn't make sense to me on why. No, I guess I still have the same question, I think is what I'm asking. Sorry.
No, it's okay. If you don't feel comfortable with the document and think the document still needs work, then that comment is a relevant comment to make. Is that what, I don't want to speak for you, so I just want to make sure that I'm hearing you.
Yeah, I personally think that there was, again, strengthening from what I heard from other individuals stating, as well as my own opinion on how to elevate and lift up what people were saying and put it into that document.
Okay, got it. All right, so I have several yellow cards that were up. So let's go with Ashton and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, just again, strengthening the language. It was said already, really around, again, active transportation and really calling out those biking and cycling infrastructures. That's, I didn't know if we were going to update, take the feedback that we gave in the breakout room, go back and look at that document and update some things. But that, to me, that's the missing piece for me.
Okay. Jeffrey?
Good afternoon. I did want to point out, it looked like Tom Gentry put up a red card, so I'm not sure if you caught that.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just make quick comments. So apologies to the group. I had another meeting and came in late. And so my yellow card was more indicative of not being able to, in good faith, give a full green card. I do feel, I'll just say that I felt like the pre-read on the information that was available, I think was mostly good. I would have, and again, my bad for not being able to make the full meeting, but I would have liked to have had more opportunity to process and digest and hear the feedback from the others. So I look forward to hearing on the other yellow cards.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. Tom Hickey, Michael, and then Tom Gentry.
More or less in the same boat, that I felt like we had recommended some refinements that didn't get a chance to get moved into the document, and that we were voting on a document that we had just minutes before created some amendments to. If we were voting on the document as is for in and of itself, I don't have any huge problems with it, but we did go into the breakout room with the question, what is the most important thing in this conversation on this document for you? And we didn't even get to that in our breakout room. So I feel like it was sort of an unfinished question, and maybe that's the next thing and shouldn't have been rolled in with this vote. So that, you know, if that's the case, I'm okay, but let's be clear.
That's a really good point. It was meant to tee up the next part of our project. So I think we can certainly make some improvements on how we characterize what we're asking of you. Good comment, Tom. Okay, Michael.
In the interest of time, I will just say that my yellow card is based on my agreement with Diana and Tom Hickey. And so I just was thinking that that language, those recommendations might need to make their way into the document. I thought we were voting on it as is. So that's the reason.
Okay. Okay, good. All right, Tom Gentry, it looks like you were yellow, then you moved to red.
I moved to red after I listened to Diana, because it did sound, you wonder why we went to the breakout if that information wasn't going to become part of it. If we hadn't gone to the breakout, I would have been green, but since we did, then what happens to this information, as everybody else has mentioned?
Well, I think that I will just speak on my behalf and just say that we want to hear from you. And that's exactly what this exercise is meant to do, is to allow you to share your thoughts. And if you're not ready to move forward, then we pause and we look at how to strengthen the language. I am going to pause though and just check in with Johnell, see if you have any other feedback.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the process points are spot on. So thank you all for that. As we, in the spirit of continuous improvement, continue to refine. I can certainly see how there could be some concern in us asking you to go into a breakout room to sort of react to the vision document. You offer us some good feedback and we go directly into a vote. So our apologies on that. I think what I would propose as sort of next steps is for us to take all of the good feedback that you have given us as a result of the breakout groups, and take a stab at sort of integrating those thoughts into a refined vision document that we can take back up at our next meeting. We might even ask for a couple volunteers to sit with us in sort of a subcommittee. And so look for that as well, so that we can kind of refine it, perhaps with a few of you who might be interested in working with us. And then we'll bring back a full document to this group at our next meeting. So if that sounds okay, that's how I would propose we sort of move forward.
So Johnell, I would just like to speak on one of the substantive points that was brought up. The issue of the focus on the active transportation facility and what it will look like. The commitment from this team extends back from the CRC days of having something that will both be safe, attractive, and easy to access. And furthermore, we're looking at how we connect active transportation routes and paths that lay along this corridor to this. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that there is a very, very serious commitment to getting the active transportation portion of this done extremely well. We will be having workshops and working groups speaking about what this should look like and what the connections should look like. So just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, Johnell, you just unmuted because you're gonna.
No, I was going to thank Greg for his comments and just to get a gut if folks are fine with sort of what I recommended. That's how I would recommend we move forward.
Johnell, this is Ed Washington here.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah. Since there's no consensus, I would at least like to say that this particular motion did not pass. There was not consensus. And I like the idea of bringing some people in to work over this and then bring it back to the group and also to make sure that they know exactly what the process is going to be when they go in, whether it can be a vote. And I would strongly urge that subcommittee be made up of representatives from both sides of the river to make sure that we can come back with a product that will pass muster.
Thank you. Our agenda reflects that we would move to the next section, which is advancing the program. I saw random green that I think that we're all in agreement with getting some revised language out, and it'll be presented to us for consensus at the next meeting. So I won't call for a formal vote, but thank you for all the thumbs up and happy places. And we will move to the next phase, which is advancing the program, which is where we get to learn more from our resident experts who still speak our language. And I would just ask that Angela Finley and Chris Regan take it away.
Thanks, Lynn. Angela Finley here with the IBR environmental team. Chris is not here today, so I'll do my best. I just wanted to, as Lynn and Lisa have indicated, just give you a preview for where the project work is moving toward. This graphic that is on the slide, you can see that it's kind of in the shape of an arrow, and we have already taken the first steps, which is looking at the prior planning work, the purpose and need, the vision and values, the past study. This committee or this group answered the question, what has changed? We had a couple exercises on that, and similarly, our equity advisory group and our executive steering group, as well as the public and our surveys in February, all helped us answer that question. So we are moving into the middle part of this pathway, which is looking at establishing the program commitments, objectives, community priorities and values, developing performance measures and design option screening criteria that will help us figure out and weigh the pros and cons of design options that we need to make in order to account for those changes we identified. We will, after developing those design options, we'll go through a screening process, identify the most promising options, and that feeds into the reevaluation that we were speaking about earlier when Greg was giving updates and had some follow-up questions. The outcome of that reevaluation leads into that other graphic that had the 4 NEPA pathways, whether we're able to end with just the reevaluation or whether we need to go to some form of a supplemental environmental impact statement, or if we need to kind of start fresh. If you just click the next slide, that'll bring up a yellow circle in the middle of this area, which is really what we're focusing on the next couple of months, as I said, with performance measures and screening criteria and development of design options. And if we go to the next slide, yes, thank you. This is just helping differentiate between those two terms of performance measures and screening criteria. So we're not using them interchangeably. We are actually using them for different purposes. The performance measures are going to be program level, and they will span the life of the program. Some of those program level performance measures, we won't be able to measure their success until we get into later phases of the program, such as construction or final design. Whereas the screening criteria are really the metrics that we'll use to evaluate the pros and cons of each of the design options. Excuse me. The next slide is just a graphical representation of what I just said. I know there's a lot of colors on this, so let me just walk through it really quickly. The bottom line is the design option development, then moving into the environmental documentation phase, design, construction, and ultimately when the bridge is built, it's under operation. So then moving up to the middle area, excuse me, the middle arrow is showing that the design screening criteria and applying those screening criteria is just happening during the design option development. Whereas on the top bar, we have the performance measures that are being defined and developed for a longer time and applied during the later phases of the project. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we'll be heading over the next several months or the remainder of this calendar year. But for your next meeting, we wanted to plant some seeds for you to think about. Is we have a lot of past work, design work, transit planning. There were proposed improvements to interchanges, active transportation, that's the pedestrian and bicycle, rolling facilities, the river crossing itself, different options for addressing climate values and urban design considerations. And so this discussion question is, I believe, what will be asked at the next meeting. So we wanted to get you thinking about it today, is saying what changes since the previous project should be considered and reflected in the bridge replacement solution. So that is a bit of a cliffhanger, but if you can give that some thought, we will be talking more about that next meeting. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Lisa, I believe. Thanks.
Thanks, Angela. Were there any questions of Angela before we move on? We have a couple minutes. I know we want to move into public comment, but I just want to pause and just see Kevin and Sam and Irina. So there are a couple questions. Let's go with Kevin first.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Angela, for that overview. That was incredibly helpful. And maybe my question relates to the what's next as well, but could you maybe, in light of, I think the president has his first State of the Union address here in about 15 or 20 minutes, of which I'm sure he'll talk about the $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan and how that relates to the $1.8 trillion family plan, of which in the infrastructure plan, I think there's something like $115 billion toward roads and bridges. Can you help us understand, or me understand, how does, in light of what's happening right now in DC, how does our project, in terms of the status of where it is sits right now, being viewed at a federal level in terms of priority, in terms of attracting resources for this? Because I'm concerned, I want to understand the pace at which this process goes and what's leveraged from past and how we ensure that our community is able to take advantage of those dollars in a timely fashion and not miss this opportunity.
Yeah, excellent question, Kevin. And our leadership is definitely taking that into consideration. And Greg, if you're still there, you might be able to better answer this question than I.
I am, and thanks for the question. We are not what has been called shovel ready, but what we are trying to demonstrate on a national basis is that we are shovel worthy. The factors surrounding this bridge are unique, and I don't think can be found anywhere else in the nation. We've been compared to a bridge over the Ohio River between Cincinnati and Kentucky, but that bridge itself is only 65 years old. We have a 104-year-old bridge. So we're making the case that this is exactly when the president speaks about build back better, this is exactly what we're talking about, to modernize this structure, to put high capacity transit, to put non-motorized or active transportation facilities across. So we're definitely involved in the conversation. One of the key things is getting alignment between all of the partners to make sure we're speaking with one voice when we go to the US DOT and make our ask for dollars.
Thank you, Greg. If there are things that we can do to help, please let us know. And I could also connect with you offline from a workforce standpoint as well.
Will do.
Okay, it looks like we have Sam and Irina. We're right at the time where we open up public comment. So if you could be brief, and if there's any follow-up that we need to do, I'm happy to do that offline. I want to make sure that we allow enough time for public comment. So
Okay, 30
Sam.
seconds. Yeah,
Okay.
just really quick. Thank you so much, Angela. I was so excited when you put up the application timeline. I thought that it was kind of a beginnings of a Gantt chart. I started putting dates on it. So the construction begins at 2025, but then this is not to scale. I would love to see, I know Greg does not want to put up any artificial deadlines or anything, but it'd be good to, I think, get public excited if we could just say, hey, what are we shooting for? What are we aiming for? Right. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, my question was, what is interchange? Because
What
we
is an
to think about it, and I'm like, I have no idea what it is.
Okay, so the interchanges are where you can get on and off of I-5.
Got
So
it.
there are 7 interchanges in our program area.
Thank you.
Does that answers it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thanks, Angela. If there are questions that you had based on this section that you didn't feel like we had enough time to cover, please shoot us an email. Let's make sure that we are ready for the next CAG meeting so that we can address any questions that we weren't able to cover in our time together. I'm gonna actually skip this what's next. I'm gonna open up public comment, and then I'm gonna go back to what's next because I wanna make sure we allow enough time for public comment. There's some exciting things that we have going on with the program, but we really do value the public comment element. I also just want to share, we did send out some clarification on our public comment process to the community advisory groups. So hopefully everyone had a chance to review that. Kind of 2 key elements that I want to share here is that we are asking for the public to weigh in and provide us feedback. In order to do that, we ask that the public dial the numbers that are listed 1-669-900-6833 or 1-408-638-0968. The meeting ID is 993-5459-6043. The passcode is 674942. I know that's a lot of numbers. We ask that you hit *9 on your phone to raise your hand. I will call on you to provide comments, and then *6 to unmute yourself. If you'd provide your name and affiliation, we will allow you to speak for 2 minutes. I will, at 2 minutes, provide a bit of a verbal warning that we need you to wrap up. So it is important that you start to do that quickly so that we can move to the next person. Instructions to the community advisory group. This is not an opportunity for a 2-way dialogue with our public And so if you have comments or questions based on the public comment, then please email the program and we will follow up. So we want to make sure that we cover everyone. I see we have 5 people that already want to participate, which puts us at exactly the 10-minute mark for our public comment. So with that, can you go to the next slide just to make sure that I didn't miss any instructions? Just as we've mentioned before in our meetings, if you have any public comments, please feel free to email the program at info@interstatebridge.org and make sure to include CAG Public Comment in the subject line. We do send all public comment that's been received to our community advisory group so that they have an opportunity to review those. Okay, with that, I will go ahead and get started. I'm going to call on the last 4 numbers of your phone number and ask that you unmute yourself. So the first number is 8577.
Good afternoon. Can folks hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. My name is Aaron Brown. I'm calling on behalf of No More Freeways. I wanted to call and thank the CAG members who have been giving a good faith effort to help shape the future of this region and make sure that any transportation project across the Columbia River addresses all of these community values. I heard a lot I personally agree with. We do need to reduce congestion. We need to prepare for seismic events. We need to act on climate. We need to be actively anti-racist in how we invest in mega projects. I've heard these concerns expressed by CAG members over the last couple of meetings. I'm calling in today because I'm concerned that all of these issues that you flagged won't actively be addressed by ODOT and WSDOT without your continued vigilance and persistence. All of the values I heard today are ultimately worthless if they are not reflected in the purpose and need document. Please don't let ODOT and WSDOT move forward without a purpose and need that doesn't reflect these values. The previous purpose and need document was identified a decade ago. 10 years ago was a long time. Brandon Roy was still playing for the Blazers. Adele was just getting famous in England. Oprah was still on television. Kate Middleton's wedding happened in 2011. The world is very different now. Carbon in the atmosphere has gone from 391 parts per million to 420. We're finally having meaningful conversations about reckoning with racism and white supremacy in our housing and transportation decisions. And we know even more about how truly terrible air pollution is from cars and how much transit investments are climate justice investments that create better jobs. And we're also talking about how ODOT has billions for freeway expansions, but not the tens of thousands that they need to put crosswalks on 82nd Avenue, where 2 Portlanders have been killed just this month. I don't want any of you getting hoodwinked into giving ODOT a thumbs up for moving forward with a microwave rebranded version of the Columbia River crossing, but that's exactly what the old purpose and need document is. If you as the CAG feel you need to pursue option 4 to redo the NEPA process to get this agency to truly live these community values, I hope you'll actively pursue this route regardless of what the project consultants say. The price of gas, urgency of acting on climate, our understanding of induced demand have dramatically changed in the last 10 years. And the CRC with a 12-lane freeway expansion sold with a handful of deceptions to local governments. You should be extremely wary of signing off on letting the IBR staff move forward with any recycled plans that continue to add more lanes, which rob us of the funding for transit, rob us of clean air to breathe, rob current and future generations of a livable future. There are iterations of this transportation investment across the river using congestion pricing, high-speed rail.
I need you to wrap up,
My time
sir.
is out. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate it. I know there's an urgency to get this project built. Let's not squander this opportunity in a project that doesn't meet our goals. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, the next public commenter has the last 4 of their phone number, 9567. Okay. Okay, thank you. Welcome. Please share your comments. I'm starting the time right now.
I'm Robert Liberty, resident of Portland. I was a member of the Metro Council during the time the Columbia River crossing alternatives were considered and the federal EIS and record of decision were debated and adopted. You need to know that many alternatives that would clearly have met the very generic purpose and need statement were eliminated based just on opinions at an abstract level without any data and analysis. Despite the $200 million spent on the EIS process, there was no quantification of the eliminated alternatives to determine whether they could have achieved the same or better benefits with fewer burdens at a lower cost. You deserve to be briefed both about the approved project, Columbia River Crossing, and about the alternatives that were eliminated and how and why they were eliminated. Doing so now will reduce your risk of another project failure, which is a higher and greater risk than experiencing an additional delay of 2 or 3 years. The risk of another project failure is higher when the project is more expensive than it needs to be, And it's greater the more forcefully you try to marginalize people who have constructive suggestions for a better project. Finally, it would be helpful to me to confirm that the Citizen Advisory Committee members received the materials I sent to the project on Sunday night. And I do appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you. We did send those materials on to the rest of the community advisory group. We appreciate you sending them in time for us to do so. The next caller has a phone number that ends in 6225. So if you'd go ahead and, great, welcome. Go ahead, your time starts now.
Good afternoon. John Lee from Camas, private citizen. I want to thank everyone here, but especially the people that asked for more data. That is extremely important, and one of my concerns over this enduring process is that we have an awful lot that has changed in the last decade in terms of population growth, where they work, their origination and destination, and that I believe you should make informed decisions into this process. It was earlier made the statement that there couldn't be a tunnel that failed to meet the needs. It was stated that we couldn't have a third bridge crossing because it failed to pass the test. Well, what's the test? It's the purpose and needs statement. And therefore, I would strongly suggest, as other citizens have, that you modify the purpose and needs so that it would allow the consideration of a tunnel, of a third bridge, of other options based on what the people today want, not what the people a decade ago want. So thank you very much. People's time is their most important commodity, and what people want more than anything else is to save time in their transportation, whether it's for work or pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, the next person to speak has phone number ending in 4524. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And I will start your time right now.
Hi, thank you. Joe Courtwright, and I am also with No More Freeways. And again, thank you for the time you're spending as citizens on this process. We really appreciate it. I just want to suggest that we're on the Titanic, and what we're doing, or what you're being asked to do by the staff, is discuss the arrangement of the deck chairs. And nobody is talking about the iceberg. And the iceberg is really, what is the project that's being proposed here? And it's clear now that by sticking to the existing EIS and record of decision, they're planning to simply recycle the failed CRC proposal. While they call it the Bridge Replacement Project, that's an intentionally misleading title. The only part of it that's actually right is the number 5. According to the project's own documents, it's 5 miles long. It'll cost about $5 billion, and people will have to pay about $5 a round trip to use it. It's not a bridge replacement. It's a 5-mile long, 12-lane wide freeway that just happens to cross a river. It stretches 5 miles from Lombard in Portland to Mill Plain Boulevard in Vancouver. It's 12 lanes over the Columbia River and even wider on Hayden Island, where it's 14 or 16 lanes wide. It's going to cost, according to the project's own estimates, upwards of $5 billion, and probably more because they routinely have cost overruns on big projects. That's true of ODOT and WashDOT. And according to their tolling financial estimates, which the staff said is what they used in their financial plan that they're working on right now, they would charge a minimum of $2.60 each way for people crossing the I-5 bridge. It will be higher during peak hours, $3.25 an hour. But that means everybody who crosses the bridge has to pay $5 per round trip. And if you're talking about equity, if you're talking about affordability, if you're talking about all the things you say you're concerned about, you should be talking about what this project actually entails and not about a superficial list of design considerations. It's time for ODOT and WashDOT to be honest about what they're proposing. It's a 5-5-5 project, 5 miles of freeway costing $5 billion and charging $5 a round trip. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have 2 more callers. We are almost at time, but I think it's important that we continue to listen to public comment and limit it to 2 minutes. If you can't stay on, I totally understand, but we are going to go ahead with the last 2 callers that have called in. So I'm looking at phone number ending in 2997. Okay, go ahead and share your feedback. I'll start your time right now.
Thank you very much. Joe Kunzler, private citizen. I sadly didn't make the time, Lisa, to submit email comments ahead of time, but I am very supportive of this conversation about a new bridge over the Columbia River. However, I hope that this time minds will be more open about mode and about efficiency. This is a project that is a huge share of any Washington State transportation package at over $1 billion as is. If there's any way to shave the cost so there's more money for transit, there's more money for sidewalks, that's equity. Second point, I really think if light rail is going to be brought across the bridge height is a legitimate issue. The fact voters in Washington State have said no to TriMet and its multitudes of problems, like a steel bridge drawbridge that delays all lines of MAX, and its governance issues. I just really think that for the sake of this crossing, it might be better just to have CTRAN be asked to provide double tall buses to connect downtown Vancouver, Washington to a point that's agreeable for Oregonians in a bus lane, fully protected bus lane that would move more people in a more equal way at a fare that's more equitable, at a cost that's more equitable, and really move people, not cars, and move people and not dollars. And I think that needs to be the focus of this bridge, is moving humans and moving freight in that order, and not have special boutique things like, bringing, TriMet light rail, which I have ridden. And again, there's a lot of governance issues and financial issues, and I'd rather see this project end with a successful new bridge with bus-only lanes across there. So you're quite welcome.
Thanks for your
Thanks
feedback.
for having me. Yeah.
The next caller has phone number that ends in 1111. Go ahead and get started. I'll start your time now.
Yes, this is Bob Workwood with the Washington Business Alliance. I have a master's in civil engineering. I just wanted to send in some information. You can read it. It's on the Immerse 2 pedal. It's actually had several submissions, but I was going to go over that one. But I'd like to just correct two misconceptions I heard tonight about the Immerse 2 pedal. One was that it was to dig up a lot of archaeological and historical sites. Actually, there's some good maps in the old CRC EIS, and if you weigh the actual excavation or the ramps to a tunnel, they would have no impact on any of the historical or archaeological sites. The other misconception is that an Immerse tube tunnel would have trouble connecting to existing interchanges. Actually, that's the major advantage, because not coming down from 150 feet, a bridge would have to come down. It's coming up only from maybe 50 feet. So there wouldn't be much with grade, and much less grade is better for your light rail, for your truck traffic, for bicycles and pedestrians. Otherwise, you would have to go up. Imagine bicycles going up the equivalent of a 15-story building, 150 feet. Much simpler to go underneath the river. Please look at the submissions I've sent in. The Fraser River was built in 1959, the Immerse tube tunnel, under a channel of 38 feet deep. The channel on the Columbia is only 15, so it would be much simpler to build the Immerse tube tunnel on the Columbia than they did back in 1959 on the Fraser. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. Brent, does that wrap up our public comment?
Yes, that does wrap up public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. I know that we went a couple minutes over. I would like to just move back to the what's next slide quickly. Thank you for staying a little bit longer. We have multiple listening sessions. So we have committed to doing what we just did. So ensuring that we're spending the time to listen, and we want to be able to continue continue to do so. The dates and times that are listed on this slide include specific focus around Hayden Island, multimodal freight movement, downtown Vancouver, active transportation, and environmental and climate considerations. We had a tremendous response to the multimodal commuter. I want to thank those members of the community advisory group that participated and that called in. We actually had 300 register. We had a little bit over 100 that actually attended. We had great feedback. We got some really good insight from that session. And as much as it's difficult for our engineering team not to respond with answers to the many questions that are raised in each of these listening sessions, the point is for us to hear from the community. And it's just a little bit more difficult to do so in this environment, but that's not stopping us. The next slide will kind of share a little bit with you about what to expect June 3rd. So Jason mentioned that we do have a bit of a break between this meeting and the next. We're resetting in order to try and accommodate as many of our community advisory group members as possible. So we are now starting to meet the first week of the month on Thursdays, same time. So we want to introduce the next program phase, discuss the design options, talk a little bit about working groups, and then revisit the question that was asked: what changes since the previous project should be considered and reflected in a bridge replacement solution? The other thing that we are going to try and do at that next meeting is reach consensus on the community values. So we heard from you today. We'll go back and do a red line version, send it back out for feedback, and look for you to provide your input. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., we have an executive steering group meeting, which just as a reminder, both Lynn and Ed, our co-chairs, participate on that ESG group. They will be presenting an overview of what we accomplished today in our meeting. And you're welcome to tune in and to listen. We also have our equity advisory group meeting, which is May 17th from 5:30 to 7:30. So just really encourage, as you are continuing to get to know the program and the other advisory groups, it's important that you have these dates on your calendar. If you can call in, it's great to do so and to be able to hear what's being presented at each of these other advisory groups. And with that, I think that was all of the wrap up. I will turn it over to our chair, Mr. Washington, to officially wrap this all up.
Yes, I'm wrapping it up. Thank you so very much for your patience being here. Thank you also for your the action you took on the charter and your suggestions about the community values and priorities. And so have a good evening. Enjoy the sun. I guess maybe it's a little bit of sun left, but we'll see you next time around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.